This is Jake and Claire and Sanjay. And Jake works at a company called IncrediWeb, and he got called into a meeting one day with both Claire and Sanjay. They said, we need to talk because we have some issues that have been reported to us that came through our IncrediWeb company web form that told us that people were having some trouble using our site. And Jake got a little bit nervous, and there's lots of reasons for that, but he was told at the beginning of the meeting that there were a lot of accessibility-related issues that were found in the site, and people had been submitting feedback. So this is the IncrediWeb company. They are masters at building websites and e-commerce sites, and they focus on that. It's really what they do. Don't look too closely, or you will see that they also are masters at cloning themselves and getting really, really good, highly productive workers. So they started to get this feedback, and Jake sat there with Claire and Sanjay, and they said, we're getting this kind of feedback from people that are using our stuff. I'm really struggling to select a color for the t-shirt I want. The buttons are too close together for me. I can't seem to change the size of the text. I'm trying to buy this, but I can't do it with the keyboard. I can't quite understand this video. There's too much background noise, and there's no captions. And I'm having a tough time remembering what went wrong and how to fix it. People were trying to submit and to make their payment, and they were getting errors, and they couldn't figure out what to do to actually fix the problem. Now, Jake prided himself and his team on being really good web designers and developers. But there were a whole lot of things that they had assumed were going to be accessible because of the way that they built them that just ended up not being that way. And these were all a whole bunch of examples of that feedback that came from real people. And that was difficult for Jake to hear. He thought that they had done a pretty good job. He thought that they had made things accessible. So they're all pretty happy. They finish their meeting, and they kind of go their separate ways. And, you can see what happens here. Claire and Sanjay leave, and Jake, I don't know if you saw it. Let's take a look at that again. You can see what happens to Jake's mouth. He was a little forlorn. He didn't know what to do. And so, of course, the first thing that he did was he went into Slack and he typed, "We've got some work to do." And the team comes a-running. So Sheldon comes, Renata comes, Parker and Jason and Amina, they all come, and that whole team is there, and they say, we don't know what to do, but let's do this. And Jake was very, very hard on the team. And it wasn't a good place. He said, I thought we did this in the right way. I thought we made things accessible. Why is this wrong? Why isn't this working? And so they started to unpack it a little bit more, and they looked at the feedback, and they looked at what they had done, and they realized that they needed to ultimately get some help. And so Jake calls a friend. Jake called me. Jake basically said that he really has no idea what he's doing. He thought he had a good understanding of accessibility, of design, of development, and how to build things in an accessible way and how to design them in an accessible way. Much like our dog friend here, he kind of has some ideas about what to do, but something in that environment just didn't work out right for him. So Jake had some really fundamental questions. He's like, whose job is this? Like, the designers did their thing, the developers did their thing, but something broke down, so whose job is this? How does this actually work? How do we start? When we got in touch with Jake, or when Jake got in touch with us, and we kind of said, well, here's what we found. We found 237 issues in their kind of their e-commerce flow in terms of having a product page, searching, adding things to the cart, the whole checkout process, the confirmation. In that flow, we found 237 things that were accessibility issues, and we rated them all. Like some of them were high severity, some of them were medium, and some of them were low. And they all had kind of different priorities. And so they didn't really know how to start. They're like, whoa, 237 issues, but it's only like 4 files. I'm like, dude, it doesn't work like that. There's 237 issues because you've got this big flow and all kinds of things that just really aren't quite the way they need to be. So we found these 237 issues, and they're like, how do we start? And they also needed to know this. What are we missing? They really did think that they knew what they were doing. They had good standards-based developers, and they had designers that knew how to deal with color contrast, and they knew how to design accessible color palettes. But there was obviously a lot more to it than that. So Jake asked these questions, and of course, the first thing that I did was I went to my 4-year-old, and I asked him, how do we approach this problem? And here's what he told me. You can already see he's totally fearless. And I don't know if you can see what his shirt says, and I'm sorry for all those of you out there that are dads, but his shirt says, "My dad is the best in the galaxy." So sorry to break that to you, but he gave this advice. I was like, this is perfect.
We have to work as a teamwork. We're not afraid. 1, 2, 3, go.
That's it. Like, that is it. If nothing else, I hope you all utter this phrase as you leave here and take this with you. We have to work as a teamwork. And as funny as it is, this is our reality in the world of accessibility. We have to work as a teamwork. We can't be afraid, and we have to actually make some progress. One of the things that happens when we give a report to somebody that says, here's the 237 things that weren't quite right from an accessibility perspective, they're like, whoa, like that's way too much. We've had people that we've worked with before that have kind of expected to get like about 15 things. And then we've turned something over, and we're actually like, there's like no big reveal. We reveal things as we go. And so they just kind of kept seeing the number mount every week. And so this particular team gets to 237 issues, and they're like, wow, this is way worse than we thought it was. So they needed to not be afraid of it, and they needed to tackle it in a really sane and logical way. And then 1, 2, 3, go. You have to start, right? You have to start. So as fun as this advice is, and it had nothing to do with accessibility when I asked him, and he didn't even know what we were talking about, and I swear to you, I did not prompt him to say these things. He just did it because he's 4. That's what he does. So we have to take all of that and package it into something that makes sense. And so what we've started thinking about is this, that accessibility lives in people, it lives in process, and it lives in tools. And if we can make it so that it lives in all 3 of those places and not just one of those places, then we can create something that is sustainable. Accessibility usually starts with people. In almost every organization that we work with, it starts in people. We get good ideas, people get passionate about it, and they're like, yes, we're going to do this. But it lives in maybe 1 or 2 people or 3 people or whatever small number it is, and it doesn't necessarily grow quite the way that we want it to. And then what happens then when that 1 or 2 or 3 people move on, or they move up, or whatever happens? So we need it to live not just in a few people, but we need it to live in all people. We need it to live in process so that it's something that's built in, so that we have checks and balances to make sure that it's taken into account through our entire process, no matter what the process is. And we have to have it live in tools so that it can support people in their work. This talk, for most of the rest of the talk, we're going to spend our time thinking about the people and the process side of it. We will touch a little bit on tools, and then we'll use those things to think about what we are actually going to do in the future. So in terms of accessibility living in people, I think the most important thing for Jake to do was this. It was to set a goal. Now, there's a lot of things that, that get talked about in the world of accessibility. And when we are designers and developers and we put our work out into the world, we get that kind of critique from all kinds of other people. And I use the word critique kind of loosely because sometimes it's more of an attack than a critique. We see all kinds of innovative designs and development techniques, and they get sometimes attacked because, like, that's not accessible, right? And that happens, right? That happens. But one of the things that I'd really like for you to be thinking about is to eliminate this word from your vocabulary when we're talking about accessibility. We should not be thinking about perfect. There's lots of people that expect perfection, and there's lots of reasons to expect perfection. However, when we think about perfect when it comes to accessibility, it brings all of these other ideas and connotations with it, that it's an absolute thing, that it's, you know, when it's perfect, it's finished, we're done, there's no more work to do, that there's no room for improvement. It really has all of those kind of ideas associated with it, including the fact that we kind of create this feeling of overwhelm and that it's unachievable if perfection is the only thing that is acceptable, right? So when we think about things as being perfect, that's kind of the mindset that we're in. When we get to thinking about accessibility, I would really much rather we all focus on this word, better. I will take 60% better than yesterday versus 0% towards perfect. And you should too, right? Better should be where we're headed with this. When we think of things and think of them in terms of being better, it's a relative term. It's not an absolute. It tells us, hey, there's always going to be more work to do. We're never going to be done. And really, being better than any previous state, any improvement over a previous state, that is a win. And we have to look at things that way. All too often when we focus on perfection, we see that, like, hey, there was 99% of it was really great, but that 1%, oh, we're a failure. So focus on better. Okay? That goal needs to be not we're going to achieve perfection. It really needs to be about it's going to be better now, better in 6 weeks than it is now. And 6 weeks after that, or 2 weeks after that, or whatever relative time period you want to put on it, let's make that commitment to being better. When we focus on better, we get a belief that we can actually do things, that we can make progress, and that all is, you know, it's not all for nothing if we don't achieve perfection right away. Every single person that is an accessibility expert or somebody that is really, really experienced with accessibility will probably tell you that they learn new things every day. Our definition of what is accessible right now is very different than what our definition of what is accessible a year from now. Those are very different things, and it evolves. That is the way that this world works, and that's the way we need to approach accessibility. It needs to be exactly the same as every other piece. Best practice for using React and Angular or whatever it is, whatever tech stack that you're using, those techniques evolve all the time. Accessibility should be no different. We invent and we create new techniques for accessibility all the time. It should fall under that same in that same mindset. So we get that mindset. The second thing that we shared with Jake was we've got to start and learn very quickly. You've probably heard the phrase fail early and fail often. When we work with teams on accessibility, we often say, like, we want success early and we want success often. A small win can take a team that thought something was absolutely not doable and lift them up so high that they actually take off and accelerate and get better and better and better over time. So we want to start and learn quickly. Excuse me. In order to do that, we have to take some pretty simple steps. Look to the standards. Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0, that's your standard that you need to meet. Generally speaking, so WCAG 2 AA. That's what basically the entire world is standardizing on as the standard for accessibility. And if you're not aware of this, WCAG 2.1 is in the works right now, an update because WCAG 2 came out in 2008. Right? So we're now at the point where it's almost a decade on, we're getting the next revision, and there's going to be some updates that take into account things that weren't really nearly as important in 2008. And because the spec came out in 2008, it means the work was being done in 2006 and 2007. Before, smartphones were like the thing. So there's some updates to WCAG 2.1, or that are in draft form, that are going to help us take into account and make things better for people that are using mobile phones and the assistive technologies on them. Now that team had 237 things to fix, and we basically said, don't look at it as 237 things to fix. Put that part out of your mind. When they put together an estimate for how long they thought it would take for them to fix those 237 items, they said it's going to take 2 developers full-time for 10 months. And the first thing we said, prove it. Like, let's validate or invalidate that assumption as quickly as we can. They had never done really some focused accessibility work before. So it was really important. They had, and I say this not like tongue-in-cheek, they had 0 skills of estimation for accessibility-specific things. They could estimate their own things. They could put story points on things. They could do that for the work that they needed to do regularly. But they didn't know how to do that for accessibility-specific issues. So they needed to get skilled at that. And the only way to get skilled at that is to try it and then to learn from that experience. So they were an agile team. We worked with them in very agile methodology as well. So they actually said, we're going to take 1 week and do a mini sprint, basically half a sprint. They were on 2-week iterations. But they said, we're going to take 1 week, and we're going to try and fix 20 of those things out of the 237 in that time period. We worked with them to choose the 20 things so that some of them were easy, some of them were much harder and more complex. Some of them were design-related issues. Some of them were things that only had to do with CSS. Others were things that were some pretty hardcore and heavy JavaScript. So we created this cross-section of those 20 issues so that they could see, what can we do in a week? They went into it open-minded. They were a little scared. They were afraid. But they started, and they got 17 of the 20 done. They knew right away that their estimate of taking 2 developers full-time for 10 months was way off. They revised it almost immediately to be 2 developers for 3 months and not even spending like 100% of their time on it. So that was a huge win for them because it wasn't about necessarily the change that they made from an accessibility perspective, although there was a win there getting those 17 things fixed. The biggest win for them was that they now understood how to estimate their velocity as they're trying to fix the other 217 issues. That was their win. And it was brilliant, it was wonderful, and it made the team that was working on things actually, like, their levels lifted. They felt much better about it, and they didn't feel like this is going to be forever. They actually felt, we can do this. And they made progress. It was brilliant to see them continue to work on this. So I'd like you to think about that. We work with agile teams all the time, and most of you probably work in agile environments or agile-ish environments, or environments where you say you're agile, but you're really not doing it agile. But it ultimately doesn't matter. Pick something, start there, and then see what you learn from it, and use that to estimate the rest. Use that to attack the rest. Use every sprint, excuse me, use every sprint as a learning opportunity to figure out what you're going to do next. The reality is, when we work in the field of accessibility, or when you're working in the field of the web and you're doing accessibility things, you think you know things, but you realize as you go down the rabbit hole, you kind of end up with more questions than you have answers. And that's good. It means that you're thinking about things. It means that you're ready to move forward. Third thing, worked with Jake and his team to research and create a plan. Now, When I say research, I'm talking about actually working with real people with disabilities. We gave them 237 results, but they also they had this feedback that they were getting from people filling out their form and giving them this accessibility feedback. They needed to see how this stuff played out in the real world. So they grabbed a panel of people and they did some sampling and they ran some usability tests. Excuse me. So they did research. This is what that research looks like. That is them doing research. That is, of course. Now, we have to do research because we create things that are pretty technical, but and I don't know if you guys know this, but we're all nerds in here. And the people that we're mostly building things for, they're not like us. They just aren't like us. We don't know how things are going to work until people actually use them in the real world, right? Things happen. This set of escalators is in a mall in Florida. And you don't know, it's a still, so you can't see which way they're moving. They are all moving. But if I give you one of these, you can fill in the rest, kind of like a Sudoku puzzle, right? So if I tell you that this one on the right is going from the top floor down to the middle floor, what is the next one doing? Which way is it going? Up or down? Down. And what about the one beside it then? Come on, 50-50 chance here, people. Like, the next one is going up, and the next one is going up. We almost all look at this and intuitively know that this is what should happen if you know that this one on the far right is going down from the top floor to the middle floor. And yet, now, I don't know why. The person that turns on the escalators might have been hungover and turned the key the wrong way, right? It could be completely nefarious mall ownership saying, we need everybody to go right over there and go buy that one store because they paid us extra rent this month or something. I have no idea. But we intuitively know that, excuse me, that there's something wrong about that, right? We know that there's something wrong. We know that it doesn't fit. The reality is, we can do all of the testing that we want on things in a lab, but until we see how it works in the real world, we don't really think of how it's actually going to work. We don't see how it really works. Now, this little issue here with the escalators going the wrong way has a different impact on people. Now, as you can see, the mall wasn't that busy that day. If we have 5 or 6 people on the top floor, and another 10 or so people on the middle floor, and another 5 or 6 people on the bottom floor, and they're all trying to get to different floors, probably not too big of a deal. However, if we have 100 people on the top floor, 200 people on the middle floor, and 100 people on the bottom floor, we have a problem. Because all the people that are on the top floor, of the 100, if 50 of them are going to go to the middle floor and 50 are going to go to the bottom floor, and we have a whole bunch of people on the bottom floor, and 50 of them are going to go to the middle floor, and 50 of them are going to go to the top floor, think about what has to happen here. I'm on the top floor, I'm in this far right escalator, and I get down to the bottom, and instead of just turning the corner and going down, I actually have to go across the path of people that are coming up the other elevator. This is like classic Ghostbusters don't cross the streams moment, right? We get these streams of traffic that don't work well together. Now, you can imagine what that's like with 100 on the top, 200 on the middle, and 100 on the bottom. But let's take 20% of the number that are on each floor and give them a disability. My grandfather hated taking the elevator in malls, but he would take the escalator. He had a stroke in the mid-1980s, and he had a cane, and he wasn't really able to bend his knee anymore, so he kind of had to walk like this. Well, what's it going to be like for him to come down that escalator and have to cross that stream of oncoming traffic to go down to the next escalator. What is it going to be like for someone, excuse me, what is it going to be like for someone that is blind or that expects to come down that escalator and just turn the corner and go down the next one and suddenly have a wave of oncoming people? That's not to say that this is like, an unsolvable problem, and maybe they do it by design on this to deal with flow. I know in airports I often see that sometimes they'll have 3 escalators and 2 will be going up and 1 will be coming down because the way that the traffic will be at that time of day, for example. But until we see how things work for real, we don't actually know how it's going to be. Our 100% test coverage in a lab doesn't necessarily mean that the experience is going to be great. So with that in mind, we're going to do one really quick thing, and this is an example of something that worked really well in the lab, but kind of failed when we tested this in real life. So we're going to do this. This might be the last time that I ever do this, ever. Take your left hand or your right hand, whichever one you want, and hold it up. Go ahead. I can't really see you because it's quite bright out there, but I'm going to assume that you're all hands up. Now, take it like you're holding onto a straw, tiny little straw, and you're going to look through that straw, close the other eye, and look at the screen. Now, don't be surprised. There's nothing on the screen yet. So you can put your straws down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reveal an interface, and what you need to do is complete that interface. Okay, so it's a form that you have to fill out. Make sense? All right, so straws up. You have to figure out what the form is all about, and you need to fill it out. Those of you that are in the middle, I don't know which, I'm going to watch and see which screen you look at. This is already fascinating to me. All right, here we go. Here's the interface. Straws are up. Other eye is closed. And while you do that, I shall take a photo of you. Some of you are finished and some of you are still working. That is totally fine. We all go at our own pace. Can you tell that I used to be a high school teacher? Everything is cool. It's all good. This interface was coded to perfection. It was technically correct and it tested well in the lab. But when we got it out there into the real world, or we're testing it in usability testing with people with low vision, it didn't work well at all. It worked really well for people that used a screen reader that were completely blind. But for someone with low vision, it actually failed in a whole lot of different respects. So one of the things that we did, when we're looking through the straw, what we're effectively doing is limiting your field of view. And that limited field of view is very similar to what someone with low vision might experience as they are using a screen. Makes sense, right? So as you were looking through, what you're doing is effectively reducing your field of vision. Now, people with low vision might have that might happen naturally because they actually have a limited field of view. Some people have central vision only and they don't have any peripheral vision. Other people have no central vision and they just have peripheral vision. But the reality is, people that have low vision very often magnify their screen so that they're in a situation like this where they can only see a small portion of it at a time. So when you're using this, you're looking at the question, when we get over to those answers, they're now effectively miles apart because of the magnification and the limited field of view. So these questions now, these answers now have almost no relationship with the questions that they related to. That's a big reason why this interface started to fail for people with low vision. Now, what motion did you find yourself going through as you were filling out this form? And I'm seeing a bunch of people do this, back and forth, back and forth. So we were on the left for the first question, now we're on this first answer. Second question, back over to the right for the answers, back over to the left, back over to the right, back over to the left, back over to the right. What was your next move? Back over to the left, where we have our exact least desirable call to action. Did you also find, some of you may have, some of you may have not found this, but as you were panning over in the interface looking through the straw, you kind of knew how far to go over after the first couple? Like you knew that if I go over there, that's where the next thing is going to be. You develop a muscle memory. Now, sometimes that muscle memory is like actually knowing how to pan across. Sometimes that muscle memory is how far over do I need to move the mouse to bring that next block of content into view. So we allow muscle memory to kick in, and we get to our second least favorite call to action. When we take all of that and combine them together and look at those buttons, we have a quit button, a previous button, and a next button. And in design terms, we say they have all the same visual weight. They're all roughly the same size. They have the same color, the same shape. The only way to tell the difference between them is to read them. And what if you have low vision and struggle with reading what's on those buttons? We have created this like conspiracy against people that have low vision with this interface, even though it worked perfectly for someone that used a screen reader. We didn't see this in the lab. We saw this in like real life. And it was quite a thing. So there's a whole bunch of things that we need to fix up here. The fact is, all of those were kind of chunked in correctly. We have these two questions together and two sets of answers together and two questions and two answers. We really need to modify that. It shouldn't be those chunks. We also created a pattern of use that put us on exactly the wrong call to action. And then when we add in the visual weight, it makes this really difficult. Very simple to deal with. We can just redesign that form and make it be something more like this, which conveniently works really well on a mobile phone as well. That single vertical stack is way better for someone that has low vision. Turns out it's way better for someone that's working on a mobile phone as well. So now if we do this, I'll leave this with you. Straws up, go fill this one out. And I know it's kind of cheating because you've already seen the form and you know what's there, but follow this one. We don't completely eliminate panning. Some of the questions might be long, but now that they're in one column, and we've got the correct pairing between the question and the answer, this interface is much, much better and much easier to use. And if we magnify this interface, you see that the pattern of use is ultimately pretty much straight down right to the call to action that we're after. So this technically was perfect for screen reader users, but it was horrible for people with low vision. So we needed to redesign the form. I'm not saying that every single form that you ever do should be in that single vertical stack, but there's a pretty good case for that being a good default layout for most of your forms. What we did was called the straw test. We have cards that we usually use with teams as well and just sort of say, hey, use this. Think of the interaction that you're trying to complete and complete that interaction while you're looking through this hole in the card. You can do that with a hole in the card. You can put, you can just put your hand up. We do this with wireframes, with comps, with mock-ups, with whatever, with prototypes. We do it all the time, and it really helps you find things that might go wrong for someone with low vision. So I'd encourage you to use this as much as you can. So in the real world, we find feedback. And when we do testing with real people with disabilities, we learn about the way that they do things. If you look at this gentleman's keyboard, you'll see some really fascinating things. He's using that e-commerce site with this keyboard. He doesn't have any use of his hands, so he's using a mouth wand. There's so many cool things about his keyboard. What do you notice? So I heard somebody say something about color. Those are effectively like, here's your function keys, right? Keeps them kind of separate visually. What else? It's a straight up grid, right? That's not like, think of your old 101 or 102 key keyboard where you had your letters, your big space bar, your number pad off to the right, cursor keys down below, and insert, page down, page up, delete, all of those keys kind of in a cluster. He doesn't have that. He has it in a very tight grid because he's using his mouth to type with a mouth wand. Compressing that grid makes it easier for him to type because he's just turning his head and typing. What else do you notice? There's one other feature of this thing that's my favorite. It's like, oh, it's the best. It's actually the space bar that's in the middle. But yes, there's like this thing that I'm going to use an awful lot is in the middle, and it's vertical. It's vertical because that makes much more sense for him. Can you see the slight curvature? It's slightly concave. Makes it easier for him. If it was completely flat keyboard, for him to type some words, he would be really having to lean over. But because it's kind of concave around his head with that slight curve, it makes it easier for him to just turn his head. Right? He was trying to buy that thing, but he couldn't do it with the keyboard. He only uses the keyboard. The cool thing is, it doesn't matter what keyboard he's using. As long as you make things work for the keyboard, he could be using any keyboard, and it doesn't really matter. He will have tools that help him use computers the way he needs to. This woman, I love her keyboard too. It's like a fascinating little archaeological expedition trying to understand how people use the things that they, the tools that they use and what that can tell us about how they use the web. So this woman, keyboard is very different. What do you notice right away that is completely different about this keyboard compared to the other one? Sorry, there's someone. Say it again. Yeah, the buttons are inset or they're recessed, right? Why do you think that is? Any idea? She's not blind, no. She's actually got full sight. I don't know if you can see her hand. Here's the way that she types. She uses mostly her left arm only, and she types with one finger, not very fast, and she moves her arm across and types one key at a time. It's very touch sensitive, so she doesn't really have to press down very hard. She actually has very low arm strength. So she actually needs the recessed keys so that she can rest her arm, her forearm, on the keyboard so that she can actually type. So it supports her arm while she's typing, which also tells us a little bit about one of the other features of this keyboard that I think are kind of like, again, the complete opposite of what the other gentleman was using. He had a really compressed grid. Her keys are spread way far apart, so that it's much more accurate for her. There's more room for error. It's going to be less likely that she's going to hit two keys at the same time. If she tried to type, like if we still had that kind of guard for her to rest on, but the keys were really close together, it would be difficult for her. She would probably hit a bunch of keys by accident, and it would be more difficult for her to know exactly which, or accurately hit the key that she was after. She has very low arm strength, which makes it difficult for her to use a mouse as well. She's trying to select a color for the shirt, but the buttons are ultimately too close together for her. She's the kind of person that, based on the arm strength that she has, she needs two targets that are clickable to kind of have some white space around them. They can't be really compressed, or it's very difficult for her to hit the right one. This is a real photo of a guy using a computer on a train. And I don't know if he doesn't know how to increase the size in his browser or how to change his operating system settings, but he's literally looking at his screen through a really big magnifying glass. He's doing what he can to use the computer the way that he knows how. Remember when I said we're nerds and people out there that use our stuff are not? This is a great example of that, right? Maybe he was on a site where he actually couldn't change the text size, and this is what he had to resort to. I am not afraid to say that as a older male, My eyes are not nearly as good as they used to be, and when I'm trying to read stuff now, I very often have to bump up the font size to like 150% so that I can actually even just read anything that's on the screen. That's kind of our reality. We're all aging. We're all, particularly in our profession where we look at the screen all the time, our eyes are going to get worse. So, I hope that's not news to you, right? That's spoiler alert. I can't quite understand this video. There's too much background noise and no captions. Well, some people are hard of hearing and not necessarily even completely deaf. But for people that are hard of hearing, sometimes it's very difficult to distinguish foreground noise from background noise. And so there's often, we hear podcasts. People listen to podcasts all the time, and sometimes they are kind of recorded in a studio or over a call where there's not much background noise. But sometimes podcasts are recorded at conferences. It may be challenging for someone that's hard of hearing to be able to distinguish the background noise from the conference. And I'm not talking about like recording in here like we did the other night. I'm talking about like in the break area, if there was recording of podcasts or interviews of people during that break time, there's a lot of just noise and buzz from people talking with each other. So recording a podcast there might not be a great idea. The ability to distinguish foreground and background noise is actually pretty important. Captions are pretty important. I'm having a tough time remembering what went wrong and how to fix it. Well, have you seen interfaces? And I love, they're Basecamp now, and they used to be 37 signals, but they were one of the first groups to kind of pioneer that yellow fade technique, right? Here's this thing that's really important that you need to know, and now it's gone, right? Think about what that means for somebody that has memory-related issues, that has short-term memory-related issues. My brother was in a car accident almost a year and 3/4 ago, and his short-term memory, bad concussion from the accident, his short-term memory is horrible. He can't remember things. He needs those errors, for example, to persist on the screen so that he can see and keep track of what he needs to fix. And this could affect a whole lot of people in a whole lot of different ways. So when we took a look at how to approach things and doing that research and planning, we prioritized things for and with that team in a couple of different ways. So ultimately, we looked at 5 years of data, not just from that particular client, but across all of our clients, to find out what the most common issues were. And we found that 60 to 70% of the issues that we found and that we logged, so 60 to 70% of that 237 were related to one of these three things: keyboard, images, or forms. Now I say images, I really mean like any kind of media. Maybe it's not images, it could be audio, it could be video, it could be whatever. It could be a complex infographic. But 60 to 70% of the things that we find with all of our clients are related to keyboard, images, and forms. And that tells you, even though, so keyboard, images, and forms, if you look at the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, they make up about 25% of all the things that you need to do. 25% of all of them, like just counting them out, about 25% of them are keyboard, images, and forms. And yet 60 to 70% of the issues that we find were keyboard, images, and forms. That's a big difference. We prioritize with almost every team, fix these things first. One of the biggest reasons for fixing keyboard issues first is because keyboard issues impact almost everybody. People need to be able to use the keyboard to complete tasks. And that should be a thing, we talk with teams too and say, how did this get through to the point where you're finding in QA for the first time that this widget that you built doesn't work with the keyboard? We should never get to that point if we can, right? So this is like one of the best ways to do this. The team was looking at it and saying, well, we've got 237 issues to fix. We're not done until we finish all of them. We're like, yes, absolutely. We're not saying don't fix all of the other things. We're saying start with these three because they tend to have the biggest impact. So we help them create a prioritized plan. you need to prioritize things as well. You probably have accessibility issues that are sitting in your backlog that need to be prioritized. If you had 100 of them in there, I would find the ones that are keyboard related in the most critical flows and fix those things first. They benefit the most people. When we're talking about prioritization, we have to kind of go back to business, and we think about things like business value. Business value, like an accessibility issue, let's put it this way. Think of that company, the IncrediWeb company that built this e-commerce site. The ability to use the keyboard on the checkout form is a pretty severe issue. It's a thing that we need to do. The ability to use the keyboard to fill in the contact form is pretty significant. But the ability to use a keyboard on, say, an FAQ page is a little bit less important. Right? And that's from a kind of a business value perspective. We have to prioritize based on business value. We always look for things, the highest impact with the lowest complexity. Things that you can fix that are low complexity but have huge payoffs. Are there things that are highest risk? You might have a marketing campaign, or you might be sending people to a page with some, like paid advertising or whatever it is, that is trying to send millions and millions of people to a specific page. That brings it in to a higher risk category because it has higher visibility. We're not just relying on people finding it randomly and needing it. We're actually telling people to go there, and therefore it kind of makes it a higher risk page. The other thing that we look at in terms of priorities is, are there other problems that we solve by fixing this accessibility problem? And almost every single team that we've ever worked with, we've said, hey, here's all these things that we need to fix. And they're like, yes, accessibility, we're going to do this. And then the second thing they say is, yes, this means we get to do that re-architecture we've been dreaming of for 3 years. We've been putting it off, and this is the impetus that we can use to actually kick off that project. Right? They're re-architecting, or they want to standardize, or they want to implement, they want to take things and create their design pattern library, and they want to use that, and this is the excuse that they need. Sometimes that helps drive a priority. So we've talked a little bit about people. I want to talk about process and tools. Important that Jake created their standard. And I'd like you to think about doing that too. Now, that's not to say that your standard is different from everybody else's standard. We're still going to hit WCAG 2 AA. But when I say your standard, it really means that it's this. We're looking at a standard that says we want to always evolve to get better. And it's not about we could solve a problem with keyboard accessibility in 5 different ways. We could create forms in multiple different ways and still have them be accessible. The important part is for you to say, this is how we do it at IncrediWeb. This is how we do things. And that comes down to your design patterns, to your style guide, to your pattern library, to whatever it is. You need to document these things, or your teammates need to document them, and you need to build them into all of your process. This is one of my favorite things of all time that I've seen on the internet. Does anybody know what this is? What famous restaurant, I say famous loosely, but what famous restaurant uses this? There's a Waffle House. This is the Waffle House cheat sheet, and it's basically how they keep track of orders. And so ultimately with this, they have a really smart set of defaults, and they have a whole system for how to plate food or how to keep track of orders. So I'll give you a really quick example here. So you order breakfast, and there's extras that you want, like, you have your standard breakfast, which is, I can't remember, but it's all of the things that you have. But if there's an extra that you want, like, oh, I want a whole bunch of cheese on there, they just put cheese on the plate to say cheese. And if you want jalapeno peppers with your hash browns, they put a jalapeno pepper on there so that it's tracked. And they just have this system for getting the breakfasts out and doing it quickly. I love this here, on the grill for the eggs. Up at the top, I think basted, which is, I don't even know what that is. I'm Canadian. I've never heard of basted eggs before, but I'm going to go with it. Over light, over medium, over well, poached, and I don't know what's down there because it's off the screen. And they have an entire way of like saying for omelets, here's what kind of omelet it is. It's ham if it's at the top. It's a plain omelet if it's at the left. It's a sausage omelet if it's on the right. They go through this entire system, and it's all basically about having a way of denoting things and then building into that defaults that are really smart. So the default is grits, the default is buttered white toast, and the default is hash browns in a ring. So if you just say you need a breakfast, you just need to say scrambled, and then you get all the rest of the defaults. But if you want scrambled with brown toast, scrambled brown dry, or scrambled brown, right? So you have this smart set of defaults. That's really all a pattern library and a design system is. A set of sensible defaults with an agreed upon language for doing things. You need to build that into your process, and that's the most important thing that if I could share that with you, is take that on as a thing. Shopify's Polaris, accessibility built in. Not necessarily as detail as I might like, but they've got accessibility built in. It shows that it's on the minds of every person that's there when they were building it, and it puts it front and center for people that are building using it. The Lightning Design System from Salesforce, their UX team, fantastic work, and accessibility built in. And you can see this in the slides. They've got, here's the base element, here's the code for it, and they've even got things that say, hey, here's the accessibility related information to this. Don't change this thing because we need that for accessibility, right? Leave this the way that it is. Anything else, fair game, you can modify it, you can adjust, you can do whatever. And they even go through multiple states. So this is how we do it with a placeholder. We have a label, we have an icon, we have a statement about this field being required. All of that is there, and it's documented, and it's ready for anybody to use. Kind of a critical piece, and it's part of what I mean when we're talking about making sure that accessibility lives in process. Same thing for modals. Here's how that works. Make sure that this modal has a role of dialogue. When the modal is open, everything behind it has an HTML attribute, aria hidden equals true, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Accessibility is just built in. It's the only way to really do it and to make it be a sustainable thing. We need to move it out of the heads of one or two or three or a handful of people and make it part of your process overall. Just another little variation, things that we did this for a client before, and we actually built in this list. We've got a whole bunch of things that go in here that we think make for a good pattern library entry from an accessibility perspective. This thing is tried and true. You know what its status is. You know how long it's been since it's been updated. You have ways to contribute to it, and not just in general, but also like specifically with accessibility. And then there was a call to action thing on there, like, hey, if you have questions about the accessibility of this thing, get in touch with the accessibility team. We document things, and we need to make sure that we document them well. We document source order at a micro level. So putting numbers on things to say, this is the order in which things go. We document things in interaction tables. This is one of my favorite things that we ever do, because you just create this big grid of really useful information that in this scenario, here's the focus change that we're expecting. When you click on this thing, the focus needs to go there. And we document that. It becomes very unambiguous, and it becomes very standardized, and it makes development and design go much faster, much quicker. We're working with teams that are creating things like this, where they are now building into their design documents, their design documentation, things like this. Here's the screen. Here is an annotated order and tab flow. And they created their own language for this. This is the way we're going to do things. We're going to put the thing that should be read out by a screen reader, we're going to put that in quotes, and then the thing in brackets is a cue to the developer to say, make it this thing. When we have a sign-in button, we want it to actually be a button and not a link. When we've got a help me sign in thing, we don't want that to be a button. We want it to be a link, right? So calling that out actually and I've heard developers say to me like, don't take my choice away from me. And I've also heard developers say, thank you for making it easier for me to get this done because now I don't have to think and I can get caught up on things faster. We put notes in there. And then they build things in like this for target size, saying that thing is really small, but we're going to make sure that it's 44 pixels high and it's 100% of its container width. It leaves less room for ambiguity, and it really makes interfaces work much better. There are a number of things that I'm going to leave with you in terms of they're all in the slides, and so we don't really need to talk about them, but they are kind of like the top 5 things that we see happening with keyboard very often. I'm not going to go through them. I'm going to skip past them. Same thing with images and media, because they're all there in the slides. You don't need me to read them to you. Accessibility also lives in tools, and we need to do that to make it sustainable. There's code in there that you can use. This is just an implementation of some basic JavaScript checking that was built into a Jasmine framework for doing real-time code checks when you're in the development stack and you're actually building things. So we check for images with missing alt attributes. We check for positive tab index. We check for form field labels, and we check to make sure that those labels are all unique. The last thing that we shared with Jake was, you've come all of this way and you're making all of these steps. This is fantastic. The last step you need to take is you need to commit to the future. And what that means is we're going to make sure that this isn't a thing that dies. It's not a thing that we're going to do once. We're going to do this over and over and over again. Because you're not thinking that you're done, because there's no such thing as perfect. You're always getting better and striving for more. The team basically said, we're going to make accessibility part of everything we do, but we're also going to do one dedicated accessibility sprint every quarter. It was a great compromise. Accessibility should be built into everything, but having it as a dedicated thing brings much more attention to it and gets everybody on board. So why don't we not only integrate it into everything, but make it still a dedicated thing of its own, right? We do the same thing with performance. Everything should be performant, but we often have things like, we're going to focus on performance for this quarter or for these 3 sprints. No reason we shouldn't be doing the same for accessibility. Preparing yourself for the future helps you prepare for future interfaces. And I think of things like speech challenges. We're looking at having a sustainable accessibility process so that we can face these challenges well. All of these, all of these speech-activated home-based assistants, whether you're talking about Google Home or Alexa's through Amazon Echo or through the HomePod, whatever it is, they're all speech-enabled devices. And I want to know how that's going to work for my friend Glenda, who has cerebral palsy and doesn't really speak very well. She speaks Glendanese. I've talked to her. We correspond much better over email. I went out for dinner with her once, and I was getting used to talking to her, and I could understand what she was saying, and then as soon as we went out for dinner, where there was a whole lot of people, I suddenly couldn't understand anything, because I wasn't able to focus on what she was saying because of all the other background noise. We need to be thinking about this as a new frontier and as the new spot for us to go, and I want you to be thinking about this.
What's the buttons?
Oh no, they installed voice recognition technology in this lift. I heard about this.
Voice recognition technology in a lift in Scotland. You ever tried voice recognition technology?
No.
They don't do Scottish accents.
11.
Could you please repeat that?
11.
11. 11.
11.
Could you please repeat that?
11.
Whose idea was this? You need to try an American accent. 11. 11.
That sounds Irish, no American.
What, doesn't it? 11.
Where in America is that? Dublin?
I'm sorry. Could you please repeat that?
Try an English accent, right?
11. 11.
You for the same part of England as Dick Van Dyke?
Listen, yours then, smart ass.
Please speak slowly and clearly.
Smart ass.
11.
I'm sorry. Could you please repeat that?
11. 11. 11. 11.
You're just saying it the same way.
I want to keep saying it until I understand Scottish, all right? 11. 11. 11.
This is a voice-activated elevator. Please state which floor you would like to go to in a clear and calm manner.
Calm. Calm. Where's that coming from? Why is it telling people to be calm?
Because I knew they'd be selling this to Scottish people who'd be going, I'm not sitting.
You have not selected a floor.
Aye, we have. 11.
If you would like to get out of the elevator without selecting a floor, simply say, "Open the doors, please."
Open the doors, please.
Please. Pathetic.
Please remain calm.
Oh, fine. Oh, you went up tonight. Get up there. Hey, just wait for it to speak.
We face all kinds of new challenges when it comes to accessibility. We need to be thinking about the future, and we need to put the systems and processes in place now so that we are set up to face these new challenges. When you're designing for the HomePod or for Google Home or for the Echo, we need to be prepared that some people might not be able to use that interface. So what's the alternative? By design, there should be another way to get those commands into those devices. Right? If you were doing that, you would be setting yourself up for the future. Ultimately, Jake and Claire and Sanjay, they just completed this recently. They got everything finished, and they are now in a mode where they are not looking at those 237 issues as a bad thing. They're actually looking, how do we find more, and how do we fix them? So they've taken some incredible steps. I hope you can take some incredible steps as well and consider accessibility in everything that you do. Thank you very much.